My master personally pushed me off the immortal punishment platform. I was injured by the violent energy of the immortal punishment platform and had been cultivating on Qiwushan mountain for more than 100 years. I lowered my head and ticked on the notebook. Javier, you are already the 48th fairy who has jumped off the immortal punishment platform in the past 1,000 years. Why don't you form a girl group? I, Juliet, am a lowly fairy maid who cleans the immortal punishment platform and also a cannon fodder passerby in all the stories of jumping off the immortal punishment platform. 1,000 years ago, I was fortunate enough to ascend and become a fairy. Although I am just an insignificant little fairy maid. After all, I have the word fairy, and was assigned to clean the immortal punishment platform. Since then, I have embarked on a long journey. In the past 1,000 years, the 3 realms have been in a very peaceful state. The immortals, demons, and monsters in the 3 realms have each been at peace. So they all started thinking about falling in love. I don't know who started it. Suddenly, everyone began to popularize jumping off the immortal punishment platform once they fall in love, greatly increasing my workload. There is no other reason. It's just that these immortal lords and fairies make a big fuss when jumping off the immortal punishment platform and are covered in blood. And their cultivation levels are not low. The blood contains spiritual energy. So it is very troublesome to clean up. Whenever someone jumps off the immortal punishment platform, it is always a grand event and of different types. There are those who jump after having a child. Those who jump while holding a child. Those who jump after being disfigured. Those who jump while being chased and killed. Those who jump after having their immortal bones removed. Those who jump after having their souls separated. And there are also those who jump together. Adding Javier who just came to find me. There are exactly 48. I was holding a broom made of white bird feathers and was vigorously cleaning the immortal punishment platform itself and the white jade steps around it. Javier sat there in a daze. Her gaze falling on the void. Without moving for a long time. It took me a long time to sweep to her side. Fairy. Move your butt. Let me clean here and then you can sit again. Javier's gaze fell on me. She looked very sad. Juliet. Should I just stay on Qiwushan mountain and not return to the immortal realm? Of course not. I said. What's good about the mortal world? You can't have enough to eat or wear warm clothes. Unlike the immortal realm, where even sweeping the floor comes with room and board and 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund, fairies like you also have a separate palace to live in. If you really stay in the mortal world, you can't even afford a house. Javier probably didn't expect me to be so practical. She stared at me blankly. I also know why she is so sad. After her master brought her back to the immortal realm, for some reason, he started to ignore Javier. Sometimes he was cold and sarcastic. When Javier wanted to leave, he blocked her again, after several entanglements. Today, Javier's master is going to get married to his fiancée who has returned from experiencing tribulations. After I finished cleaning once, I turned around and saw Javier still standing there. So I kindly suggested, Fairy, if you are really angry, why don't you go and disrupt the wedding, lift their clouds, overturn their flower carts, and beat your master to the ground. Make sure he knows that you are not easy to bully. As I was talking enthusiastically here, a soft laugh suddenly came from behind. This sound was pleasant and carried 3 parts of laziness and indifference, yet subtly implied majesty. I immediately fell silent. Looking back, I quickly saluted together with Javier, God K. Ashton, Juliet. God K. Ashton looked at me lazily. After not seeing you for a few days, why are you still so outspoken? I didn't dare to speak. God K. Ashton is the most powerful existence in the immortal realm. His status is even higher than that of the Heavenly Emperor. I have heard some rumors. It is said that the current position of the Heavenly Emperor was given to him by God K. Ashton 10,000 years ago. And the Heavenly Emperor himself doesn't dare to provoke God K. Ashton. There is no other reason. It's just that he can't beat him. Therefore, God K. Ashton can be said to have the final say in the immortal realm. Fortunately, It seems that he himself has no desires or demands. Every day, except for carrying a lantern and strolling around, he is closed up in his mansion cultivating, carrying a lantern in broad daylight. There must be something wrong with his mind. I didn't dare to say this. If I said it, I'm afraid there would be no me. Juliet. In the immortal realm tomorrow. Seeing that I didn't speak, God K. Ashton was very satisfied and laughed. Then he looked at Javier on the side. Javier. God, Javier is here. Just now when I came over, I saw that your master's wedding was interrupted halfway. But he said that now the person he loves is no longer his fiancé. As God K. Ashton spoke, he looked at Javier calmly. Guess who the person he now holds dear is? Javier bit her lip. She asked God K. Ashton about her master's current location, and then left gracefully. I asked God K. Ashton, God, when did you start a side business of matchmaking? God K. Ashton took out a dagger. I gave an embarrassed smile. Just kidding. Just kidding. He held that lantern made of white paper, and stood on the immortal punishment platform for a long time. His gaze was always fixed on the platform below, surrounded by violent energy. I stood with him for a while holding the broom and asked, Javier has also returned. It seems that every god who jumps off the immortal punishment platform will eventually return to the immortal realm. None of them have died. Isn't this immortal punishment platform a bit unworthy of its name? God K. Ashton. Is there no god in the immortal realm who really died after jumping off the immortal punishment platform and didn't come back to life? My question didn't get an answer for a long time. God K. Ashton was silent all the time. For a very long time. So long that when I thought he wouldn't answer me anymore, suddenly, he spoke. His gaze fell on me. It was cold and clear, with a slight trance, and also seemed to be falling on a very distant place. He said hoarsely, there is, generally speaking, if a god can read the situation, they should be able to see the unforgettable sadness in God K. Ashton's eyes at this moment and then aptly change the topic. But I am a little fairy maid, who can't read people's expressions. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be sweeping the floor after being in the immortal realm for 1,000 years. I very tactlessly asked, who? God. Please tell me more. God K. Ashton glanced back at me and said lie, sweep the floor well. Then he left gracefully. The golden light in the clouds seeped out in shades. It happened to shine on the back of God K. Ashton as he left. I stood there holding the broom and looking at him. Suddenly, I felt that the white robe looked very lonely. In the past 1,000 years when love has been in vogue in the immortal realm, God K. Ashton has always been alone. Of course, maybe he doesn't feel lonely himself. But in the eyes of us outsiders, there will always be a few more sighs. When I was going back after finishing work at night, I met Emmett on the way and casually chatted about some gossip. He was about to leave. I pulled his sleeve again and asked in a low voice, ask you something. Do you know who that fairy who really died after jumping off the immortal punishment platform and didn't come back to life is? What is her relationship with God K. Ashton? Emmett turned around and looked at me in shock. I coughed softly. God K. Ashton left after telling half of the story. Not very honorable. There was a bit more gloom and trance in Emmett's eyes. He has always been carefree and doesn't have the airs of a god. After having 2 cups of wine from me, he called me brother and became close friends with me. Usually, he is also careless and without form. This is the first time I have seen him so lost. Could it be that the fairy who jumped off the immortal punishment platform also had some love-hate entanglement with him? I was concentrating and thinking carefully when I heard Emmett say softly, that fairy is God K. Ashton's fiancé. The broom in my hand fell to the ground. Fiancé? God K. Ashton actually had a fiancé? After I ascended, I have heard some rumors more or less. For example, in the past 10,000 years, it's not that there haven't been fairies who have shown love to God K. Ashton. Even the only female demon lord in the demon realm has shown interest in him, and wanted to have an epic cross-species love. But they were all rejected by God K. Ashton. I thought he liked men. Emmett calmed down and continued to talk to me. I heard his hoarse voice. Looking up, I saw the rolling and unstoppable sadness in his eyes. A hand that was holding his sleeve suddenly loosened a bit. I remembered something. No matter how approachable Emmett is on weekdays, he is also a god from the same era as God Qiwushan. If God Qiwushan had a fiancé in the early years, presumably that fairy should also have had interactions with Emmett? Emmett said that in the past 1,000 years, the fairies and immortal lords who have jumped off the immortal punishment platform have all made a big fuss. In the end, none of them died. But 10,000 years ago, when God Qiwushan's fiancé jumped off the immortal punishment platform, she didn't tell anyone. She even used a lock of hair to make a fake puppet and place it in her bedchamber. She disguised her own aura to deceive others and secretly went to the immortal punishment platform and jumped down. It wasn't until 3 days later that God Qiwushan suddenly sensed something was wrong. He forcibly opened the door of the bedchamber and only then found that all this time, sitting inside was a puppet made of sacred wood. And as for the real fairy, not to mention that she had already jumped off the immortal punishment platform, even her last wisp of immortal soul was annihilated by the violent energy. As Emmett spoke, his eyes were red. I was infected by his emotions and also felt a bit sad. What did God Qiwushan do to wrong that fairy? Emmett sighed. He took out the last spot for an upper god that the fairy was about to ascend to and gave it to the then 100 Flowers fairy Tatum, who is now living in Hanqiu Mountain. As the immortal realm has developed until now, more and more mortals have ascended from the lower realms. The number of the entire group of immortals is also constantly expanding. But in the entire immortal realm, there are always only 12 upper gods. It is said that this was determined 10,000 years ago. Unless someone among these 12 commits a heinous crime and is stripped of their immortal soul and suppressed, a spot will be vacated. Otherwise, even if other immortals cultivate seriously, there is no chance of becoming an upper god. To be honest, I can't quite understand. If God Qiwushan really did such a thing, why didn't that fairy go and settle accounts with him instead of choosing to jump off the immortal punishment platform and commit suicide? I picked up the broom and waved it in the air. If it were me, it was clearly my spot. He gave it to someone else. Don't say he is my fiancé. Even if he is my own father, I would have to seek justice from him. Emmett looked at me and sighed again. He said, even if you settle accounts with God Qiwushan, what's the use? The spot has been given to Tatum. That fairy can never ascend to become an upper god again. She has cultivated for a full 3,000 years, just waiting for such an opportunity. For this, she even lost one soul and one spirit to protect the lives of all the people in the mortal world. In terms of merit, that fairy is naturally far ahead of Tatum. It's just a pity. Just a pity what? No matter how much I asked next, Emmett wouldn't say any more. Annoyed by my pestering, he said, why are you so concerned about God Qiwushan's affairs? If it weren't for him blocking it, how could you have been in the immortal realm for 1,000 years and still be sweeping the floor? I was stunned. What did you say? Emmett's expression changed drastically. He threw down a sentence of just pretend you didn't hear anything, and left in a hurry. How could I pretend I didn't hear anything? Judging from what Emmett said, it seems that I could have been promoted long ago and didn't need to sweep the immortal punishment platform anymore. But God Qiwushan deliberately blocked it, and made me stay here and continue sweeping. Is he sick? Isn't it enough to harm his fiancé? Now he comes to make things difficult for me. I was so enraged that I lost all rationality. I grabbed the broom and flew furiously to the outside of God Qiwushan's mansion. As it turned out, I just saw him standing at the gate with a lantern in his hand, looking at me intently like that. Behind him, the evening glow was setting. In a sea of blood red, there was inexplicably a hint of loneliness. Juliet, you are here. Judging from his tone, he doesn't think I came to chat with him, right? I got straight to the point and questioned, God Qiwushan, is it because of your interference that I have been staying at the immortal punishment platform and sweeping for the past 1,000 years? Yes, just admitted it so calmly. I was so angry that my eyes turned red. Why? Clearly the entire immortal knows that I very much want to be promoted to a true immortal, and don't want to be the lowest level little fairy maid anymore. On the surface, you are approachable and indifferent to worldly affairs. But behind people's backs, you do such things. Are you still human? I am not. God K. Ashton looked at me intently. I am a god. So reasonable that I didn't know how to refute. I calmed myself down. God K. Ashton, when I ascended to the immortal realm, it was you who received me. In the past 1,000 years, I have always been respectful to you and never had the slightest act of offense. Where did I offend you? Why are you making things difficult for me? From the reflection in God K. Ashton's pupils, I saw my current appearance. Holding a broom and widening my eyes, I looked like a gender-swapped, low-spec version of Harry Potter. Instantly, all my imposing manner vanished, perhaps sensing my sad and dejected aura. God K. Ashton looked at me for a long time. Suddenly, he gave a faint smile. Because your name is Juliet. I frowned. What's wrong with being named Juliet? This is the name my parents gave me. Do you have an opinion on this too? God K. Ashton suddenly took 2 steps closer to me. He was originally a head taller than me. Now that he closed the distance, the height difference was even more obvious. He just looked down at me. The emotions in his eyes were completely hidden, leaving only a desolate indifference. He said, "Didn't you already hear the story from Emmett? Then did he tell you that my fiancée who jumped off the immortal punishment platform and had her soul scattered also has the name Juliet?" I was extremely confused. There are indeed many people named Juliet in this world. If there aren't 10,000, there are at least 8,000. Why don't you catch them all one by one and deal with them in the immortal realm? I mocked. God K. Ashton still looked at me coldly. There are indeed many people named Juliet. But among those who have ascended to the immortal realm, there is indeed only you. Why could he say such shameless things and such absurd reasons so confidently? Could it be that having a thick skin is a necessary but not sufficient condition for ascending to become an upper god? Thinking of my struggles in the human world's workplace before ascending, it was because of my leader's obstruction that I had the top performance ranking in the entire department for 3 consecutive years but was still a grassroots employee. Suddenly, anger rose in my heart. Even if I have the same name as your fiancée, I am not her. Besides, according to the common plot of substitute stories, since you miss your fiancée, shouldn't you transfer your kindness to her to me? It's fine if you don't promote me. Why are you making things difficult for me? Juliet. Read less novels when you're not sweeping. God K. Ashton sneered. Also, who told you that I miss her? I was stunned. Suddenly, the fog in God K. Ashton's eyes dissipated, and a wisp of distinct hatred emerged. He said, "I don't miss her. I hate her. I hate her so much that I want to find her scattered one soul and one spirit and crush them inch by inch to make her completely disappear. I hate her so much that I can't bear to see the night anymore. I hate her so much that even if it's just someone with the same name as her, I can't wait to kill her. Do you understand?" I was terrified. I had never seen God K. Ashton like this before. A god who was originally without desires and pursuits had inexplicably become an extreme and sickly possessive person. I was oppressed by the spreading hatred in the depths of his eyes and was afraid that he would attack me. So after thinking for a moment and realizing that I probably couldn't defeat him, I grabbed the broom and escaped. After returning, after much thought, I felt something was not right. As per Emmett's earlier account, I had initially thought this was yet another trite story of a chasing wife to a point of desperation due to misunderstandings. But after hearing God K. Ashton's version, I realized it was not so straightforward. His hatred for that fairy named Juliet, who was the same as me, was so distinct. It didn't seem to be pretended. But clearly it was he who did something wrong to that fairy. How could he have the nerve to hate her? Could there be some inside story that I don't know? In the middle of the night, I took a pot of wine and secretly went to look for Emmett to inquire about some information. But I didn't find him in the places he often went, such as the roof, the peach blossom forest, and the valley hot spring. So I had to go back and hurry to sleep for a few hours to prepare for going to work again after dawn. But as soon as I woke up, the little fairy maid in the next room came to call me, and said that the Heavenly Emperor wanted to see me. I was brought into the magnificent hall made of white jade in a daze. Originally, I thought the Heavenly Emperor would be a middle-aged man with a lofty status. But I didn't expect him to be young and good-looking and also seem very approachable. He stood in the center of the hall and looked at me steadily. There was an extremely complicated light flashing in his eyes. After bowing and saluting, I happened to see this scene. After all, I am also a person who has read widely. Immediately, I had some speculations. Could it be that my identity is unusual? For example, am I actually the reincarnation of that fairy named Juliet 10,000 years ago? I am a little fairy maid who can't hide things in my heart. Immediately, I asked this question. The Heavenly Emperor was stunned for a moment and chuckled. You are overthinking. You do have some similarities with her. Whether it's your name or your eyebrows and eyes. But you are not her. That fairy named Juliet who is the same as you jumped off the immortal punishment platform long ago. Her soul was shattered into powder by the violent energy there. She has no possibility of reincarnation. When these words came out of his mouth, for some reason, I could clearly hear a hint of mockery. Thoughts were swirling in my heart. But on the surface, I only pretended not to know and looked at him blankly. The Heavenly Emperor seemed very satisfied with my reaction, and revealed some more information to me. For example, why can't the current immortal punishment platform kill immortals? It is precisely because the soul power of that fairy named Juliet was so powerful that it fought against the violent energy under the immortal punishment platform for 3 days and 3 nights. Although she died, it also greatly weakened the power of the immortal punishment platform. Since then, the original truly deadly immortal punishment platform has become a prop for fairies and immortal lords in tragic love affairs to deepen their feelings. I captured 2 key points from his words. First, that fairy named Juliet is very powerful. I even suspect that she may be stronger than the Heavenly Emperor himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't speak in such a mocking tone and there would be a hint of relief. I just don't know whether that fairy is stronger or weaker than God Qiwushan. Or is it because she is stronger than Qiwushan that Qiwushan deprived her of the qualification to ascend to become an upper god and hates her so much? Second, the current immortal punishment platform indeed no longer has the ability to kill immortals. I lowered my head and concentrated on thinking for a moment. When I looked up, I found that the Heavenly Emperor was looking at me with interest. I didn't know how long he had been looking at me. I was stunned and then heard him say, in addition, I have already heard about God Qiwushan and deliberately blocking your promotion to a true immortal. Just now, when I checked your cultivation and merit, you indeed already have the qualification for promotion. I couldn't help showing a hint of joy. Could it be that the Heavenly Emperor is going to overthrow the evil forces of God Qiwushan and make decisions for me to get a promotion and a raise? Just as I was thinking about it, his lazy voice came over. God Qiwushan's actions this time are indeed very excessive. However, the immortal realm has been too silent for too long. I find it very boring. In this case, Juliet, no matter what you do, as long as you can make the immortal realm lively again, I will directly promote you to a true immortal. You don't need to sweep the immortal punishment platform anymore. In addition, if there is an empty mansion at the foot of Qiwushan Mountain with a very beautiful scenery, it will be rewarded to you at that time. His words seemed to have a very strong hint. And he also tempted me with great benefits. It was really very tempting. So after I went back, I immediately posted a notice in front of the immortal punishment platform. Then I stepped on a cloud and flew all over the immortal realm to announce. The first Immortal Realm Girl Group Edition officially begins to accept registrations. Welcome all beautiful fairies to actively participate. The one who debuts in the C position can enjoy the best resources. Unexpectedly, after 2 days, the Heavenly Emperor called me to the hall again for a talk. He was so angry that his brow was twitching. He questioned me. Juliet, what are you doing? I looked innocent and confused. holding an addition to make the immortal realm lively. He rubbed his brow as if forcibly suppressing his emotions. Is the liveliness you understand just so superficial? Ah. Then what else? Looking at the heavenly emperor's livid face, I finally realized belatedly that what he meant was that he wanted me to use God Qiwushan, and deliberately preventing me from getting promoted as an excuse to start a vigorous and Qiwushan movement in the immortal realm. It seems that he has been brooding over these two rumors that his position as the heavenly emperor was given to him by Qiwushan, and that he doesn't dare to easily provoke Qiwushan for a long time. I hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "But I have already promoted for a day. The posters have also been put up. Even the prize for the champion has been prepared. There is no turning back once the arrow is released." The heavenly emperor rubbed his brow again. "Finally," he said faintly, "your audition can be held. However, this matter cannot be done without meaning." After saying that, he had the little fairy maid send me out. I didn't leave. I just lingered outside the hall, and carefully pondered over the heavenly emperor's words. Sometimes, I really hope that leaders can speak directly. But obviously, they can't. They must be mysterious. After thinking for a long time, I finally figured out something. What he meant might be that he hoped I would pull God Qiwushan in. Through this audition, let his reputation in the immortal realm completely collapse. It's not impossible, but this might be a bit complicated to operate. I don't know if more money can be added. I looked back at that tall and magnificent hall. Forget it. I went to God Qiwushan's mansion again and found that he wasn't there. Probably he was wandering around again with his lantern. So I first returned to the immortal punishment platform and found a large crowd gathered there. When they saw me, they all enthusiastically surrounded me. I, Juliet, have swept the immortal punishment platform for 1,000 years and been a cannon fodder in tragic love stories for 1,000 years. This is the first time I have received such treatment. I was very flattered. It took me a whole morning to register more than 70 fairies who came to sign up. Then I sorted out the list and organized it in different categories. Actually, the prizes for this competition are not so precious. But in the past 1,000 years in the immortal realm, there have been only love entanglements. Everyone probably finds it quite boring. So when there is excitement, they all want to participate. In the afternoon, Emmett came to the immortal punishment platform. He looked at me with complicated eyes. At that time, I was sitting on the steps with my legs spread out and looking at him frankly. Emmett sat down beside me and asked in a low voice, "Juliet, what exactly do you want to do?" "Hold an audition." His tone paused. "I divined your fate." "What?" "If you continue on this path, there is a bottomless abyss and pitch darkness ahead. Take a step back and at least you can save your life." I found it a bit funny, and patted Emmett on the shoulder. "What are you talking about? I'm just holding an audition. You make it sound like I'm going to start a rebellion." "All right. I won't talk to you anymore. I need to leave the immortal realm for a while." Emmett was startled. "Where are you going?" "To Hanqiu Mountain to invite Tatum to be my judge." I got up and flew away from the immortal punishment platform on a cloud. Emmett reached out as if he wanted to catch me but missed me. After all, I have been sweeping the ground beside the immortal punishment platform for 1,000 years. I have absorbed 7 or 8/10 of the scattered spiritual energy when those fairies and immortal lords jumped down. My cultivation has advanced again and again. That's why the heavenly emperor said that with my cultivation, I already had the qualification to be promoted to a true immortal. In other novels, I must be like a hidden master like the sweeping monk. I probably flew for half a day and arrived at Hanqiu Mountain at dusk. Takum is the goddess of 100 flowers. So the entire mountain is filled with flowers of various colors. Her mansion is located in a cherry blossom forest with falling petals. When I arrived there, she was sitting on a tree drinking and taking a nap. As soon as I landed, she also jumped down and pointed her sword at me from a distance. When her gaze fell on my face, the sword suddenly fell from her hand. "Juliet." Tatsum looked at me in disbelief. Tears welled up layer by layer in those eyes with a light pinkish brown color. Juliet. Is it you? Have you come back? I looked at Tatum running towards me in confusion. The long and flowing skirt on her body gently brushed past my fingers. And then a strange fragrance hit me. Tatum hugged me. And tears dropped on my shoulder one by one. They all said you would never come back. But I didn't believe it. Juliet. Why is the scene different from what I imagined? According to the known information told by Emmett and the common plot of general novels, shouldn't Tatum be the mortal enemy of that fairy named Juliet? Also, why did she recognize me as that fairy without me introducing myself? I should not look the same as that fairy, right? Moreover, the Heavenly Emperor also said that I am not that Juliet. While I was still thinking, Tatum suddenly stopped crying, pushed me away, and then looked at me coldly. Several thin vines quietly wrapped around my limbs and then tight and more. Soon I couldn't move at all. You are not her. She raised her hand. And the sword flew back into her hand. She deftly made a sword flower, and put the sword blade against my neck. With an expressionless face, she said, "Tell me, who sent you? What's your purpose? Why do you have her aura? Are those people from the demon realm still not giving up?" I looked at her in confusion. Aura? Demon realm? What is Tatum talking about? And who is that she? Could it be referring to that fairy named Juliet who has the same name as me? I gave an embarrassed smile. God, perhaps you have mistaken me. I am just a little fairy maid who sweeps the immortal punishment platform. My name is Juliet. I came to invite you to be a judge for my audition competition. Before I could finish the latter half of the sentence, Tatum had already let out a cold shout. And the sword pressed closer to my neck again. Who allowed you to have this name? I was stunned. I have had this name since before I ascended. It was given by my parents. Tatum couldn't help but be slightly stunned. You ascended from the mortal world? Yes. She bit her lip and suddenly took out something that looked like a crystal ball from her bosom. She cast a spell and made it float in front of me. Countless dazzling white lights scattered from it. I subconsciously closed my eyes. Then I felt the cold sword blade against my neck move away. I opened my eyes and saw that Tatum's expression had returned to her usual cold and noble look. She casually put away the sword and looked at me inferently. What's the matter with you coming to find me? I quickly explained my purpose and emphasized that because of her beauty, and the famous aesthetic degree of spellcasting in the three realms, the authority of this judge must undoubtedly belong to her. During the whole process, Tatum listened to me very calmly. Just when I thought she would probably agree, she flatly refused me. It sounds quite interesting. But I have decided that unless the three realms are in chaos, I will not leave Hanqiu Mountain again. You go find someone else. I looked distressed. But besides you, who else can sit with God Qiwushan and be a judge together? As soon as I finished speaking, I saw the expression on Tatum's face freeze. Countless complicated thoughts flashed in her pinkish-brown eyes at this moment. For a moment, I couldn't tell what it was exactly. When I saw it clearly, there was only a deep and cold mockery left. But clearly there was something else suppressed underneath. At a certain moment, the disguise cracked a gap, allowing me to briefly glimpse the expression underneath. That was actually like hatred. My throat seemed to be suddenly blocked by something. I wanted to open my mouth but didn't know what to say. In fact, from Emmett's previous narration and Tatum's reaction just now, I can guess that her relationship with Qiwushan and that fairy named Juliet is not as melodramatic as in the novels I have read. That's why I deliberately mentioned Qiwushan's name. Sure enough, she gave a cold smile. Since that's the case, I will agree to you. She casually cast a spell and covered the entire cherry blossom forest. Then she flew to the immortal realm with me. After all, I still live in a dormitory, so I had to ask Emmett for help and let Tatum stay for a few days. Then I went to find the Heavenly Emperor again. He was quite surprised by my behavior of taking the initiative to come to him. So he raised his eyebrows and looked at me with interest. I bravely said, Can you give me that mansion at the foot of Qiwushan Mountain in advance? Oh? Why? He seemed surprised. This is the first time I've heard of someone asking for a reward before completing the task. You can just lend it to me first. I was confident. To achieve victory, don't you have to be fully prepared? Otherwise, without even a dormitory to accommodate the contestants, judges, and guests, how can this audition be held? After hearing this, the Heavenly Emperor probably really thought it made sense. With a wave of his hand, he gave me that mansion. Another goal was achieved. I went to find Qiwushan again. After searching all over the immortal realm and not finding him, I found that he was standing in front of the immortal punishment platform again with that white paper lantern. There had just been a registration here, and the mess hadn't been cleaned up yet. After all, I haven't been promoted yet. This is still within my scope of work. So after I picked up the broom and cleaned up here, I went to find Qiwushan. Perhaps because he had exposed his extreme and sickly possessive nature in front of me before. When there was no one around, Qiwushan no longer maintained his aloof and indifferent image as a god. While I was working, he watched with great interest beside me and didn't speak. I walked over holding the broom and looked up at him, getting straight to the point. I said, "God Qiwushan, I would like to invite you to be a judge in my audition competition." Qiwushan was stunned for a moment and then suddenly laughed. Why? I twitched the corners of my mouth and gave a fake smile. Because you are the oldest god in the immortal realm. Of course. I mean the one with the longest seniority. This is the first edition competition in the immortal realm in 10,000 years. Without someone to hold the fort, how can it work? He raised his eyebrows. You don't blame me for blocking your promotion and making you sweep the immortal punishment platform for 1,000 years now. Why did he bring up something unpleasant? I was so angry inside that my teeth itched. But I still had to maintain a superficially warm smile and said insincerely, "How can I blame you?" After I went back and thought about it, God Qiwushan must have done this to train me well. When heaven is about to place a great responsibility on a person, it must first distress his mind and strain his bones. In the middle of speaking, my voice suddenly stopped because Qiwushan inexplicably took 2 steps forward and came to a position very close to me. I took a step back, and he followed and took a step forward. I took another step back. I couldn't retreat anymore. This dog god easily suppressed me with his cultivation that I don't know how much higher than mine and put an immobilization spell on me. Then he lowered his head, inch by inch, and approached me. "Juliet, lying in front of me is not good for you," he said with a light smile. "A dog or a cat. If you kill it, you kill it. Who would dare to say anything wrong? I know you also went to Qiwushan Mountain to invite Qiwushan to be your judge. You are indeed very diligent. But not all efforts in this world must have results. I have known this for a long time. So you should know it too, right? Probably to create huge psychological pressure on me." His process of lowering his head and approaching was very slow. I watched a pair of pitch-black eyes full of mockery getting closer and closer to me. The emotions overflowing in them were so intense that they were about to swallow me up. I gritted my teeth and refused to back down, looking directly at Qiwushan. "Who is afraid of whom? Who is afraid of whom? You blocked my promotion, and now you are playing this game of a sickly possessive god reasoning with me. Do you think I am afraid? I cultivated in the mortal world, gave up all my attachments and ascended with great difficulty through countless hardships. But I didn't ascend to sweep the immortal punishment platform for a lifetime. I don't know how long it took. The immobilization spell on me finally broke. I took a big step back and assumed a defensive posture. But Qiwushan didn't chase after me again. He just stood up straight and looked at me with a half smile. Then he said, "I agree to you. I might have paranoia." Qiwushan agreed so readily all of a sudden. Instead, I suspected that he was planning some conspiracy against me again. So I looked at him warily for a moment and said suspiciously, "Really? Don't you need me to do something in exchange?" He touched his chin. "How about you marry me?" "Just kidding. Kate Ashton shook the lantern in his hand and said to me inferently, "Didn't it say in the book, the white moonlight stand-in of the domineering immortal venerable, by your bedside? Generally, people with the same name, and who are treated as stand-ins always enjoy some benefits. Juliet. After all, you have the same name as my fiancée." When the last sentence came out of his mouth, his voice was deliberately softened, lingering and tender like a whisper. But it made me feel cold to the bone. I was stunned for a moment and suddenly realized. "You actually entered my dormitory? This is an invasion of privacy. Do you know?" After blurting it out, I began to regret it. I actually swore at God Kate Ashton. This moody and unpredictable sickly possessive god. Would he kill me? God Kate Ashton looked at me and suddenly sneered. "In the 3 realms. Is there any place I can't go?" I was very unconvinced. I opened my mouth to refute. But a cold and clear female voice came from behind. "Kate Ashton." I quickly turned around and saw Adam floating over on a cloud. In the blink of an eye, she flew in front of me. God Kate Ashton's gaze landed on her. On the surface, it seemed to be tinged with a smile. But deep down, it was ice cold. "Tatum, have you stayed in Hanqiu Mountain for so long that you have forgotten the rules of the immortal realm?" Tatum completely ignored him, and just asked on her own. "Where is Juliet?" Kate Ashton glanced at me. "Isn't she here?" "I'm not talking about her." Tatum only took one look at me, and then withdrew her gaze. Then she unceremoniously drew out a sword and pointed it at Kate Ashton from a distance. "You have been carrying the soul-gathering lantern and coming and going in the immortal realm for 100,000 years. Haven't you collected even a wisp of Juliet's soul? So what if there is? So what if there isn't?" Kate Ashton raised his eyebrows. There was some cold mockery in his pitch-black eyes. "Since she would rather die than marry me. If she really comes back, I will kill her again." "You." Tatum was furious, and then they started fighting. The 2 upper gods fighting each other. Even though they each only used 2 or 3 points of their spiritual power, the commotion was still astonishing. A golden light was thrown out. And even the white jade steps were smashed to pieces. I retreated to the corner at the very edge of the immortal punishment platform and silently took out the magical tool. The shining mirror. Used for photography and recorded everything. Before the audition even started, the 2 upper god judges started fighting. What a wonderful topic. The sword in Tatum's hand was extraordinary. When casting spells, pink cherry blossom petals would fall wrestling lie and then be quickly cut to pieces by the sword energy. All attacks. Even in the middle of the fight, there was still a 3 points indifferent smile on the corner of Kate Ashton's lips. Kate Ashton dealt with it even more leisurely. Walking casually, he raised his hand a few times and blocked Tatum's attacks. Looking cold and sharp, the 2 fought more and more excessively until the Heavenly Emperor's roar sounded from the distant hall outside the clouds. "Stop." Tatum thrust out a sword but missed. She coldly put away the sword and stood still in silence. In Kate Ashton's soul-gathering lantern, a glimmer of light lit up for an instant, and then quickly extinguished. "Tatum, I advise you to be more restrained. I am not Juliet. I don't have her state of mind. I can send you to become an upper god. And naturally I can also pull you down into the mire." Kate Ashton suddenly sneered. "How could I forget that she left a wisp of aura in your body?" Tatum gritted her teeth. "You are not worthy to be compared with Juliet at all." My mood is very subtle now. After all, listening to the 2 upper gods say Juliet, here and there in front of me, and yet none of them are calling me. It's really a strange thing. The Heavenly Emperor said in a cold voice. "Tatum, come here." After Tatum flew away, Kate Ashton was still standing there holding the soul-gathering lantern, not moving at all. Crying? I thought I had recorded enough footage. Silently turned off the shining mirror. Just as I was about to sneak away, I saw Kate Ashton suddenly turn around and look at me. I was startled by his red eyes. "Hesitantly," I said. "God, are you perhaps crying?" Kate Ashton suddenly threw his head back and laughed loudly, as if he had heard an extremely absurd joke from me. After a long while, he lowered his eyes again, as if looking at the clouds. After being silent for a long time, he beckoned to me. Juliet, I have thought about the exchange condition you mentioned earlier. From today on, every night, you will stay with me. I really can't figure out Kate Ashton's moody thoughts. Thinking about it again, I feel that my fate is really unpredictable. When others ascend to the immortal realm, at most they will be a little fairy maid for 300 to 500 years. After their merit and cultivation are complete, they can be promoted to a true immortal. But what about me? Not only do I have to wait for a full 1,000 years, but I also have to plan an audition. I am reluctant but have to agree. Yes. During the audition, being careful and maneuvering among several upper gods is the only way to have a chance of promotion. While feeling depressed, I am even more curious about what kind of story happened between that fairy with the same name as me and Kate Ashton, Tatum, and the Heavenly Emperor, that everyone's reaction when mentioning her is so strange. I don't know what the Heavenly Emperor talked about with Tatum after she came back. Although she was still cold and still didn't like Kate Ashton, at least she wouldn't start fighting without a word. The Heavenly Emperor gave me that mansion at the foot of Qiwushan Mountain. On the same day, I took the fairy contestants who were going to have intensive training and the 2 judges and moved in. At night, I was forced to sleep in the same room as Kate Ashton. Seeing that it was late at night and I was sleepy, he was still sitting at the table, lowering his eyes and not knowing what he was thinking. There was no way. I could only stay up with him. Just as I yawned a long time, Kate Ashton suddenly said, "Juliet, you can go to sleep." I yawned again. Politely, "Aren't you going to sleep? God? I haven't slept once in 100,000 years." I was so surprised that I almost hiccuped. Thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Kate Ashton wanders around with a lantern during the day, and still has to cultivate well at night to ensure his supreme position among the upper gods. There is really no time to sleep. After confirming that Kate Ashton didn't plan to sleep, I climbed into bed relievedly and closed my eyes. In front of me was Kate Ashton with an extremely gloomy expression. I don't know how long I slept. Suddenly, I started dreaming. In the dream, I was standing under a silk tree. His expression was extremely cold. "Juliet, do you think that just because you have the same name as her, you are her? I tell you, you are not worthy of this name at all." After saying that, he actually stabbed at my abdomen with a dagger. I tried to dodge, but was restrained by a force. At a critical moment, I finally woke up, but was frightened by the black figure standing in front of my bed. It was actually Kate Ashton. A cry of surprise was stuck in my throat and almost blurted out. However, after calming down, I realized that Kate Ashton had his eyes closed tightly, and didn't notice that I was awake at this moment. My abdomen felt a burning sensation like fire. And in Kate Ashton's hand, the white soul-gathering lantern that was never out of his hand was gone. When I woke up the next day, Kate Ashton was nowhere to be seen. I was slow for a few seconds before remembering what happened in the middle of the night. After finding that Kate Ashton's soul-gathering lantern was gone and feeling something was wrong with my lower abdomen, I immediately panicked and wanted to lift the quilt to check. But at this moment, Kate Ashton opened his eyes. When he found that I was awake, he was stunned for a moment. A hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. Then he stretched out a hand towards me, and a beam of red light fell from his fingertips. Then I fainted. At this moment, when I was awake, my first reaction was to lift the quilt and check what was on my lower abdomen that was so hot last night. As a result, after pulling down my skirt and taking a look, very good, there was nothing except fat. It was as white and smooth as jade.